Hello, hello, hello. So we should be alive. I'm really excited today to have Vyas with me. He's the host of the Conversations on India podcast. It's a podcast I do listen to quite often, and I'm a big fan of it. So I'm quite excited to have this conversation with him today. So without further ado, I will add him to the call and let's just start off with a conversation, shall we?
Hey, hello everyone.
Hey Shubham, welcome to the All Walks of Life podcast. A pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Sean.
So can you what you've been keeping up to? Like what's keeping you busy and how did you start off with your podcast? Like I think that's what most people would be interested in hearing.
All right, of course. These days I have a bunch of podcasts going on, and I always have some idea that I'm working on with some friends of mine because back from college, all of our mindset is sort of to build something and to do something cool. So I'm never too far away from some idea that I'm working on whenever I get some time, but mostly it's been doing podcasts. And how I started conversations on India is actually really a funny story because back like 1.5 year ago, I started preparing for UPSC, which was sort of a dream. Not really a dream, but I wanted to try it once and sort of read everything that you have to study for the exam, right? But of course you have to revise a lot of current affairs, and you need to have a good understanding of what's going on in the world. So what we decided to do was, me and my friend from college, we used to actually share a hostel wall. Like we were like living right next door to each other during the 4 years of my college. So we decided, and he was preparing as well, so we decided to do like a discussion each week, where we talk about whatever our whatever we are reading in current affairs. But then we realized those discussions would go off the rails very very quickly, and we would start playing chess, or we would start doing something else, and sort of not focus. So to sort of introduce that external pressure and focus, we started doing this live on Instagram. So at least, if there are people who we know who are sort of there, so we would not kid around and waste our time. We would actually focus on the discussion. So that's what really got us going. Initially it was just discussion, and we would invite one of our friends on and so on. And now
Yeah.
we've done like an year worth of episodes. We are into episode 59 now. So we now it has become like a weekly consistency thing that we keep doing. And even though I have stopped preparing for UPSC now, and he's still preparing, but still we have this continued weekly thing nice.
Nice, nice, nice. No, but like
Mhm.
even if you aren't preparing for UPSC, like you're getting into the conversation, so it's fine. You're like keeping up to
Right.
date as to what's happening and what's up.
Yeah. Y-
Okay, so
yeah, totally.
yeah. So can you talk a little bit about this aspect of like the podcasting space? Like how like you talked
Mhm.
about that when you were having these discussions, it would often go into these tangential areas which you wouldn't have planned off before and those sorts of things.
Mhm.
Like what do you think that medium of podcast in that sense offers you? Like that
Right.
ability to sort of have those free ranging conversations, which would probably be difficult in like the traditional media space.
Absolutely. So, but I mean, I'm a huge audio, like I'm really into learning via audio, and like listen to a lot of audiobooks, listen to a lot of podcasts myself. So I was sort of an early adopter of the podcast space, and and always had wanted to do like something of my own in the podcast space. And so that was always there in the back of my mind. But again, like conversation is sort of the first thing that humans started doing once they got hold of language. Like ever before we started to write, ever before we started to do anything else, sort of communicating by sound with each other was really very a core concept and much deeper than other forms of content. And even when you look at some of our oldest texts, for example, the Vedas or the Zen Avesta or Homer's texts, which are like the oldest texts. So for generations, they were communicated via audio from one generation to the next before somebody had the bright idea to actually write them down. It has like humans have always communicated via audio, and audio is sort of really very deeply embedded into our intellectual system. So that's why I think audio is like a superior form of content. And again, there are also practical reasons on why audio, right? Because when you're reading something, it sort of occupies your eyes as well as your mind, and you can't do much while you're reading. You have to be stable and sort of, so it occupies a lot of what you're doing. It occupies a lot more of your bandwidth. But listening is something that you can do while walking, while working out, while driving. So I mean, this is sort of it adds on very easily into one's lifestyle. So I mean, if you have to make lifelong learning a thing, then audio can be a huge help in that. Because people might find it difficult to find time to read. There's too much friction there. But audio sort of mixes into your lifestyle very easily. So that's why I really love the format. And that's why I started doing it.
No, and that's something I totally agree with, and that's something
Hmm.
that's a big part of my life as well. Like I consume a
Right.
lot, like especially even if it's like YouTube videos, if I just put it into my jacket, even if it's playing something like that, because most of the stuff I watch on YouTube, it's sort of listen only because it's like conversations or
Yeah.
podcasts or lectures or those sorts of
Hmm.
things. But yeah, as you're saying, it's like a great space that it's sort of given us so much time where we used to possibly be doing like menial jobs or what have you, traveling, this, that,
Hmm.
whatever. We can now add that with something substantial, something of learning. But something that's always often come to my mind when I compare it to other forms of like media and other forms of learning, like books or something of that sort, is
Hmm.
I'm not sure how much I'm able to, let's say, grasp onto the content or like hold much longer. So for example,
Hmm.
because I'm doing multiple tasks at the same time, like if I'm
Right.
walking, if I'm eating or whatever, I
Hmm.
don't think I'm taking in as much when I'm listening to a
Hmm.
podcast, when I'm watching a YouTube video or something of that sort. When I'm if on the contrary, if I'm only sitting down to reading a book and reading a book.
Right. Right.
Have
Right.
have
Right.
you has that ever come to your mind? Like if you are doing multiple tasks at the same time, even though you
Hmm.
can go ahead with it, there is some sort of like cognitive uh, bandwidth.
Yeah. Yeah. I get what you're saying. So, when you're reading, you're much more engaged. So, I mean, it is arguable that you will probably retain a lot more of what you're reading or what you're consuming. But, when it comes to having conversation or
Hmm.
listening to something, that can be a little more lighthearted and slow. But then again, when you're reading, you're forcing yourself to sit down and read, which you
Hmm.
can also do while you're listening, by having a copy in front of you and a pen in your hand while you're listening and sort of noting down important points that are coming up. So I mean, if you want to engage with the content, there are always ways to do that. More even when you're listening. The only advantage with reading is that it is much faster. So when you're listening, there are only so many words per minute that you can understand while you're listening. But then people reading can actually go a lot faster. They can decide what to skim, what not to skim. Whereas audio is sort of linear, and you need to listen to the whole thing. You sort of cannot skim the audio, or maybe you can, but it's much easier to do it with
Yeah,
reading. And
yeah,
reading is sort of a bit faster in that sense, and you have to devote yourself to it. But but it's not really a replacement for each other. So
for
don't
sure.
really
Yeah,
think of
yeah.
audio as a replacement to reading. I mean, there are some things that are much better if you read them. And whereas audio, it's sort of better for certain kinds of formats. And especially what I said earlier about lifelong learning and having sort of something that is simmering the whole time, right? That I find really valuable about audio, which
So
reading is just a little more friction there. Yeah.
So you talked about like you were at a phase of your life preparing for UPSC and those sorts of things,
Right.
and some of my
Right.
friends are in the preparation of UPSC, and some
Hmm.
have done that in the past. Like, can you talk a little bit about that process, like what it takes in the preparation? Because obviously there's so much content that's there on YouTube, and so many I've heard so many conversations about it here and there, but I've never really
Hmm.
spoken to someone in depth about it. So, like, what does it entail? Like, what's your preparation like for that? Something like that.
Yeah, so actually, the preparation, I think it is not really a good career decision in the current context. Doing the preparation, that's why I sort of stopped doing it, because there's a huge opportunity cost associated with it. Because it's something that you need to devote your life to. And
Mhm.
if you imagine the number of hours that get wasted, because only, 3-digit people, like less than 1,000 people sort of get through every year. But people who prepare are probably in the millions. So all of those people are wasting that opportunity, which they could have much rather spent on, some other skill that they're gaining. So I think that there is this unrealistic infatuation with being an officer that comes with being an Indian, because we have probably spent so many years thinking of officers and, sarkari babus as somewhat of an elite in the society. And a lot of the Indian classes sort of want to get into that. That is why, it draws as many people as it does. But when you think about it truly rationally, with the amount of opportunities that there are these days, I don't really think like the opportunity cost is too high, unless it is something that you really truly desire, and you have some sort of deep explanation of why you want to do it. But a lot of the people that I know, and a lot of people in general, I'm sure, sort of end up doing it because it's something that their parents are telling them to do, or it's something that their friends are doing, or it's something that that they have heard about, that they have heard good things about, and so on. So it would help sort of people a lot more if they could think deeply about why they want to get into the government. And if they have solid reasons for it, then go ahead, of course. But sort of don't do it in a bubbly sort of way, where you are copying other people who are doing it. And it sort of does not end well. Like it ends well for very few people in general, and then when you don't have sort of a deep desire to do it, then it definitely is not going to end well for you. So I mean, those might be some things to keep in mind.
So when you talk about the UPSC process, like, and your
Hmm.
when one prepares for it, like, isn't it true that one also has to obviously like have a good understanding of the geography and the history of the subcontinent, but
Hmm.
also like what's happening day to day, so like current affairs and those
Right.
sorts of things. So I think one of my friends who's preparing for it, he I think reads like two or three papers like every day, like back to front, like so
Hmm.
like what are some of these tidbits that you have to take in the process which other people wouldn't consider to be a part of the process, if that makes sense?
Right. So I mean, there has been enough said about this topic, and I'm not sure I can add anything new. Sort of, what are the tips for preparation? Like there is enough content out there, and the problem is really to sort the content, not really add new content. If there was anything new that I would add, is actually this spaced repetition memory tool that exists, which is called Anki, ANKI. We can probably link it in the
Yeah, will
description.
do.
So
Yeah.
what it does is, all of your notes, if you store it there as cards in your memory, right? So every day it sort of suggests you the card that you're about to forget. So essentially, it gives you a spaced repetition of all of your notes, and it increases how much you retain. It's sort of the fastest way to increase retention in terms of memory. So once you have all of your content in place, sort of like whatever you want to keep in your mind, keep building that in your mind becomes easy with this tool, where you can just flip through the tool and just read whatever your mind is about to forget and refresh that. So that tool is actually really helpful. Some of the people who have done it successfully have recommended it as well. So I mean, it's a nice tool. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when it comes to preparation, that's something that people forget when of how we actually learn in this
Hmm.
aspect of like memorization and those sorts of things. It's not so much that because what I see happening a lot is that people generally sit down and take notes, almost copy the same thing that's on the lecture slides or that's on whatever's that's there, but your brain isn't most likely isn't going to take in whatever you've written just like that and maybe just go again, read it again, maybe highlight a few parts. The right
Hmm.
way, and I think that's what you're saying, is to challenge your brain, that if you keep
Yeah.
asking it questions, even if you're new to the even if you're new to the topic area, this is something I've sort of benefited from, is that even if I haven't read the chapters or the lecture slides, whatever, I just ask myself a few questions about it. And sometimes, even though those
Hmm.
are hard and like necessary to tackle with, they often give me good insights of how to sort of go ahead with the topic area. And it comes with this aspect of spaced repetition. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, spaced repetition is the way where you are increasing your memory retention. That's why in school, or during the JE preparation days, people kept telling you to revise, because revision is how you sort of relearn the thing that you have learned in the past and you're about to forget. and but these guys have just built like a computer tool to do that. So that
That's
just
pretty cool.
simplifies the process. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Something I wanted to get into was that because you were once like preparing for the UPSC as well, and now you have a
Hmm.
podcast which is called Conversations of on India. What are some of
Hmm.
the things that you've come to know about India, about the about the beautiful country that is India, and like the multifaceted nature of it, through the conversations you've had, through the preparation you've done? Like, are there some insights that like have blown you away, or like or when you've had that conversation, you've thought twice about it? I'm sure there would be many, because India is such a country. But are there some that you could share?
Yeah, I mean, it has like it's very difficult to sort of summarize India because like where do you start and where do you end? But because there is literally so much. But like the thing that continues to fascinate me is history, and like things that last through time sort of have a unique value which is not describable. I mean, if you're lasting through time, then that essentially means that you have faced all of the adversities that have come during time. So sort of persistence and like a long continued history is something that is really very valuable. And when you think about the kind of history that India has, so the earliest recorded history is 5,000 years ago. Which was the Harappan civilization, right? And we have had a continuous chain of civilization in this part of the world, and very few parts of the world have had such a long continued chain of civilization. There is a Mesopotamian, there's the Egyptian civilization, there's the Chinese, and then there's the Indian, and sort of every other place came up after this happened. So the amount of history that there is, and there's that quote, kuch baat aisi hai ki hasti mitti nahi hamari, right? So there is something to that. There is a bunch of history that goes on in India, right? So for example, if you end up building an empire in India, you would only be one of the top 50 people who did it, because there has been so many people who have already come and done all of what you're doing right now. And like another really interesting thing that sort of took me was that all of the writings of the Eastern philosophers in general. So that includes the Chinese philosophers, right, Lao Tzu or Confucius, and even the Indian philosophers like Buddha and all, right. So all of these writings were later sort of arrived at independently by the Western thinkers as well, and that happened, at a much later stage in time. So whether it is the concept of Buddha about or the desire is the root of all evil. Schopenhauer, did it in 1700
Hmm.
AD, whereas Buddha did it in 500 BC, right? So there is something about that all of all of that intellectual progress sort of happened here early. And of course, as history goes, there have been even times of black ages where sort of society has regressed, and other parts of the world had developed more, and that is sort of the current scenario. But when we look at in the past, the intellectual achievements of our ancestors are something to be proud of, and that is another value, sort of a cultural value that India has.
Yeah. But you touched about this really interesting point when you said that if there is something when you're talking about history, and if there's something
Mhm.
that has been is was done in the past, but we're still
Mhm.
talking about it today, or it's still prevalent
Yeah.
today, doesn't that
Yeah.
make it more true in some sense? Because it's
Exactly.
almost it's traveled the test of time, and then there are many
Mhm.
sort of things people have thrown at it to almost test that particular theory or that particular individual or whatever,
Mhm.
and they've
Yeah.
stood in the test of time.
Right, exactly. So what I go back to often is the Lindy effect, which has been explained wonderfully by Nassim Nicholas Taleb, right? And
Hmm.
so its origin story is sort of interesting. So on Broadway, which is sort of New York's street where all the theaters are there, right? So that had a Lindy cafe where all the actors used to come hang out. And what these actors observed was that if a play had lasted 50 days on Broadway, it's likely life was another 50 days. But if it had lasted 100 days, its likely life was another 100 days. and if it had lasted 200, another 200. If it had lasted 400, another 400 days. Because the thing is that if something has lasted for 400 days on Broadway, then that means that is something really of very high quality, and
Hmm.
its future age is another 400 days. But if something has been there for a week, you're not really sure if it's going to last another week or not. So that is really Lindy effect, things that age in reverse. So essentially, the longer it takes, the more robust they become to adversity that is happening to them, and the longer they can live in the future. That Lindy effect is really very useful to understand value of things. So if we apply it to philosophers, so people that we talk about who are sort of really old. So on the Western side, it's probably Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates, who were right about BC to 200 300 AD, right? And people that we talk about on the Indian side are on the slightly earlier 600 BC range, so Mahavira, Buddha, and
Hmm.
even other Hindu philosophers of that age, right? So these are things that have lasted through time, and if they did not have any value, we would not be talking about them today.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah. So
mhm.
this is sort of, and we've been talking about intellectuals and philosophers. So this is sort of a
Right,
hypothetical question I do ask my guests generally, and this is
right,
something I started off recently.
yeah,
If you could be a fly on in the room and listen to a conversation between three intellectuals from the past or the present, who would they
okay,
be? Why and
okay.
what do you think they would talk about?
Okay, so this is super interesting
Because
question.
this sort of gives me this sort of question, and I'm really fascinated about through this question, because I think I heard this. There's another podcast called the Hermitex podcast. So there's this
Okay,
British YouTuber who does it, and then and this is sort of really interesting because it gives me a good insight as to my guests and what sort of their intellectual inspirations have been and how they sort of look at the
right.
world. So yeah,
Mhm.
go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, hard to pick out three people again, but I mean, people that have really been infatuated with with their thinking have been, people whose quotes that I sort of keep going back to. So one is the French philosopher Montaigne, who sort of lived during the 16th century in France, was an elite aristocrat, and wrote essays of Montaigne, and
Mm.
has a lot of quotes which sting. So I mean, he was a Latin speaker, but I'm not sure. Like the language is no bar here, okay? So we have translators
Yeah, yeah,
to
yeah,
convert
yeah.
what they're saying. Okay, so there is Montaigne is definitely in the room. Second person in the room would be Henry Kissinger,
Oh
because
damn.
he has incredible sort of insight about how the world works right now, and sort of been in in a lot of very high level conversations himself. I sort of like his intellectual, his writing, and sort of some of the one liners that he comes up with are truly incredible. So one liner that is sort of relevant right now is that since the time of Peter the Great, Russia has been growing at the rate of one Belgium per year. So essentially, it is in the nature of Russians to expand forward, and very prescient, and sort of it tells you a lot about the world, how we live it right now, and also was the one who opened up trade with China for US, and sort of all that is done for the Chinese economy and so on. So Henry Kissinger would be second, but he had a very low opinion of India, which I sort of don't agree with. But that's fine. I'll tolerate it for Kissinger. And the third person would be really interesting. We have a philosopher, we have a diplomat. I would ideally want someone who is sort of separated out from all of these people, while also has some intellectual heft. So maybe Kobe Bryant.
Oh wow. Okay.
He's he's not with us anymore, but yeah. But I mean, he would probably add a few things.
That's a pretty interesting trio. What do you think those people would talk about? Like, what do you think the conversation would go? And who do you think is going to be like
Where
dominating the conversation? Who's like the aggressor?
yeah, that is actually a hard question. I don't think Montaigne is going to dominate it, because he was sort of an introvert. like to write a lot. Kissinger is sort of a charmer of a conversationalist. So he might dominate it, and I mean Kobe was Kobe. I don't know. Yeah, Kobe would
What do you think? What do you think?
partake.
What do you think they'll be talking about? Because
Yeah,
there's so many range of interests as well over there, right? In that particular room, there's
yeah,
foreign,
yeah.
there's
So essentially, essentially, what I was going for was, different,
yeah,
totally different
yeah,
domains of expertise, so that at least the conversation is interesting. Now, what they would talk about is anybody's guess. I mean, I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah,
There are two Americans there, so they might
yeah,
talk about the current state of America or whatnot. I don't know. Maybe
yeah.
they talk about what is the difference between 16th century and right now,
That's
something like
true.
that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Fascinating stuff. No, but so like, uh, have you had similar conversations on your podcast as well, like with the guests you've had on? Because on your podcast as well, even though there is this broad theme of India and conversations around India on India, like have there been some conversations like that with guests that you've had on, uh, where you sort of like it's almost been like a mind bender that you had to go back to it and almost like think twice
Yeah.
or like
Yeah, so actually, like how the podcast started was really a very utilitarian purpose where we wanted to revise all of the current affairs concepts. So there
mm,
was not much scope for intellectual exploration and sort of doing mind expanding conversations. So but like we haven't really had that. There have been a couple of guests who have had expertise in any one particular area. So we have sort of dove deep into that. But right now, the direction in which that I want to take it, or sort of the vision for the podcast right now, is sort of to add, some intellectual value to the discourse that goes on the internet right now. So
mm,
I mean, I was really disappointed. So I come from an engineering background, and it's really hard to imagine how hard it is for engineers to sort of come out and speak their mind, because they probably think it's something which is out of their expertise. But I mean, like the voice needs to be heard, and I think there is a scientific perspective which can be added into the intellectual discourse that is going on right now. So like conversations on India is sort of an effort to do that. And like what we really want is to create a platform for people who are good at their craft to sort of come and discuss their craft with us. But I mean, it's sort of been very scattered, how we've done it, because it's been all of our friends and people who sort of know us personally are the ones following us. So we haven't really put in much effort into expanding the listenership, or trying to get more distribution on it. So because if we sort of end up getting more distribution, then we can sort of listen to the fans and try to do what our followers want to listen to. But right now it's all of our friends, and we've sort of been doing what we like. Not really been any particular direction that we've followed for too long.
yeah, I've been doing that for a couple of years, and so I think it's
Yeah.
I think that's what works best in my opinion.
Hmm.
But don't you think like this is something that I often think about? Why do you think? And this is not only limited to India, even though we sort of see it more pronounced in the Indian media space. Like, why do you think
Hmm.
the media, in some sense, is shies away from like these intellectual conversations or conversations which maybe just even take the time to sort of go into the depth or maybe ask the right questions to the people they have on or the policymakers they have on and those sorts of things. And why is it
Yeah,
like this whole new
exactly.
aspect
I
of new
mean,
media that comes in? Sorry to cut you off.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. Of course. I mean, there are a bunch of trends that are going on, which sort of shape the current media environment. So, like, if you want to hit on the biggest trend, so I think one of the biggest ones is that the attention spans have really shortened down a lot. So, people really have no patience to for like deeper conversations, and you really have to be there had to be a lot of intent in order to focus and grasp longer content. And as we have gotten into TikTok and Instagram reels more and more, content has tended to become shorter. So like that is one system effect that is happening right now, that since attention spans for users are becoming shorter, so media creators are also trying to create shorter pieces of content in order to capture their attention. That's why the space for long form conversations has sort of gone down, and it is not really commercially viable to do it in a traditional media environment where you have a studio and you have a television channel. So it sort of costs a lot of resources to make that work economically, because there is not enough people watching it, and so there can't be enough advertising revenue on the back of it.
Yeah.
Why it's happening in the new media space is really interesting, because here publishing is free. Essentially, this is permissionless publishing. We don't have to get a license to start a paper, or we don't have to get a, we don't have to have a lot of money to do it. It's sort of the amount of friction to start a new media channel has sort of gone down, and that has opened the gates to a bunch of different experimentation where creators have come out and experimented with all these various formats. So of course, in the new media space, you have people who are focusing on long form content, but that has increasingly smaller and smaller audience, because people, the short form content tends to get a lot more attention from people. So an example of that I can actually give you is that on my own podcast, when we record a 1 hour episode, we only get like 250 or 300 views on that. But when we make like short videos out of the same episode, so each 1 hour episode can yield like 20 short videos. So those short videos in total get like 200,000 views. So
Oh, wow.
there is like a total difference in the amount of reach that short form content gets for long form content versus long form content, right? So this is really the system wide effect that is taking place right now.
But
That
do you feel that and I don't know, I may be wrong on this, because
Mhm.
don't you feel that with the short form content that's there, if there is long form content that people do tune into, and if they're really interested in it, they're engaged by the conversation, by the content, um then that sort of is doing really well as well, like on the YouTube space, where there
Yes,
is long ended
exactly.
conversations where people, if they really like the content, then I don't think that time is such a barrier in some sense, if the content is
Yeah.
good.
So what we have going on here is really a power law situation where like the top 1% or the top very small minority ends up getting most of the returns that come into the space, because they are the ones who have the most distribution, and sort of everyone who is interested in that kind of content sort of flocks to them. These are classic power law dynamics, right? Where people see that in venture capital industry as well,
Mm.
where when a VC firm sort of invests in 1,000 different companies out of a fund, like 990 of them fail, but one or two of them that succeed end up returning the entire value of their fund and some more for profit, right? So essentially, there is a power law. Very few sort of end up getting most of the returns, which is happening with the long form sort of content. And but again, I mean, there are enough people out there. So if you have really quality content, then there is space to build your audience and sort of slowly grow that audience.
So
The space is definitely there. Yeah.
with the long form conversations and the long form content that's there on YouTube primarily, I'd say, and even the
Mhm.
podcasting space, don't you feel that if you have a community that is where you have like these streams, and like if you have like a podcast or something of that sort, that is a much richer community in some sense. And I say that because perhaps they know a lot more of you and a lot more of your work, and in some sense they feel
Right.
more connected to you as compared to,
Yeah.
let's say,
It's more
someone who's
tightly
on,
knit.
yeah, as compared. And I think I've had this conversation with some people on like who are content creators on Instagram, and who have big followings there. They say that even though they
Mhm.
have big followings, they don't know if they have so much of a community in some sense, because they're only coming out and showing 15 seconds of themselves or 30 seconds of themselves. So their followers or whatever they may be may like that content, but they don't really know the person as much, if that makes sense. Do you agree
Yeah,
with
yeah,
that?
yeah.
What do you make of that?
Yeah. I mean, these are totally two different things. If you want to build sort of a very close knit community, which understands you deeply and you understand them deeply, then I mean, long form is the thing. I mean, you can't get that by doing short form content. Because short form content, the interaction is very ephemeral. You sort of see a lot of short form content. Any
Yeah.
one content does not stick around for long enough for people to register. Whereas in long form, that is not the case. So there is a lot more space for the creator to influence their audience, and there is space for much deeper connection. but again, like the audience for such a connection is again limited, because not all people want to consume long form content. And only there is a subset of the entire audience which is consuming long form content. So that what do you call it, uh,
That
balance is
yeah,
always there.
yeah,
So
yeah.
if you tilt more towards short form content, you're gonna get a much larger audience, but much weaker connection with each
Mm.
any audience member. But when you get to long form, you might not get as big of an audience, but much deeper connection with all the people.
Yeah, yeah. I think so. There's this podcaster I listen to quite often. I think he's one of my favorites in the Indian podcasting space. His name is Amit Varma. So he says
Okay.
that, and he has the show. He's the host of the Seen and the Unseen podcast. So he says that
Mm-hmm.
it's not about having a community of 500,000, but it's
Mm-hmm.
about having a community of those 5,000 true fans who come back to your show again and again and again and again.
Yeah.
And in some sense, that is what like the podcasting space is, or that is what like the whole long form conversation space is.
Exactly. I mean, there is Kevin Kelly, who is, who has a blog, which everyone should read, or I recommend a lot. It's called A Thousand True Fans. So what
Oh
he
yeah,
says is
a thousand true fans. Yeah, I think I
A
messed that
Thousand
up,
True
but
Fans. Yeah. Kevin Kelly is really this old school .com era, guy who did blogging very early in the internet, and sort of now is also involved in a bunch of interesting stuff. And he has these interesting thought pieces. And like A Thousand True Fans is the definitely the one that is most popular. And what he says is, whenever you are doing something which is creative in nature, you don't really need to think that one day I'm going to have billions of dollars, or I'm going to be running a huge company or employing so many people. You only need to think about having 1000 true fans. And that is sort of an achievable target. And if you are able to have 1000 fans, then you probably have something that is creating a lot of value. And a lot of people find you interesting. And also, a thousand true fans is sort of enough critical mass for one person to sustain themselves off of what they're earning from them, right? So if you are, say, a band, and you have 1,000 true fans, all of them will buy your $10 CD. So that is enough for your band to sort of sustain. And if you can come out with a CD every year, you can make a living out of that. And similarly with artists, similarly with every other product that you can think of. So yeah, 1,000 true fans is what we should aim for.
yeah. So we've been talking about this creative, like the creative endeavor and this whole creative space. And I'm still sticking on to podcasting for a little longer because we are podcasters in some sense. What do you
Hmm.
think? Like the primary reason I would say that I started off my podcast was because I was fed up with the traditional media, and I just wanted
Hmm.
a way that I can have conversations. I guess it's a selfish way, but like that, so that I can learn off
Yeah,
it.
I
If
mean,
if
I totally understand and agree with what you're saying. Yeah.
but what I was trying to come to was this aspect of free speech in society. And I think free
Hmm.
speech, I think it's not just any other right. I think it's the most fundamental right we have in society, and it
Hmm.
sort of governs all other rights, so it keeps all other rights in check. So I
Right.
felt that the podcasting space in some sense allows one to voice their opinion in the best possible manner there is. So my question
Hmm.
here is that, did free speech or those sorts of things come into your mind when you started podcasting, or like how much of an importance you give to free speech in the society we live in?
So I mean, this hits very close to home, because free speech is something that I'm passionate about. And of course, like creating media on your own, it sort of borrows from having free speech. And since the internet has come around, it has become a lot easier to sort of express your speech. So internet has been a force for good when it comes to speech. And what I would like to see in terms of free speech in India, since I do a podcast about India, and sort of what could happen, which would enhance free speech in India. So essentially, our constitution has some laws which list down reasonable restrictions on free speech. So but essentially, in the constitution itself, there are some things which are mentioned which go against absolute free speech theory, right? So for example, there is sovereignty of state or friendly relations with another country, or order in the society, or defamation of somebody, or incitement of a crime. So some of these are probably arguable, but like there are a bunch of factors that are already listed down in the constitution. So that just reflects our society's sort of unprogressiveness when it comes to free speech, right? So I mean, in the era of internet, it is really very hard to control free speech unless you have like a authoritative system like China, right, or
Hmm.
something like Russia, where people can control free speech. But somewhere like India, where there's free access to the internet and so on, so there it's very difficult to implement these laws. And then why have these 20th century speech controls, right? These are from an older time where it was not so easy to express and so on. So I mean, that is sort of one change. That if it happens, it will enhance free speech even more. And absolutely, I am a free speech absolutist. Like the day we
Free
start
speech
banning
maximalist.
yeah,
Free
free
speech
speech
maximalist.
maxi.
Bitcoin
Yeah.
maximalist.
No, I'm a serial maximalist, but yeah,
Okay.
maybe Bitcoin too.
Yeah. No, it's great. No, but isn't that what it comes down to as well? Like when you're talking about crypto as well, with Bitcoin and any of the technologies that sort of take away power from the centralized position and make it more decentralized, and help
Exactly.
society almost think for themselves, think critically for themselves, make decisions that will implement that will help their lives better, and rather than it coming from like a centralized chain of command.
Yeah. Totally. So one thing that I would like to shout out in this space, since we're talking about, is something called decentralized social media. So
Hmm.
and I'm actually building like a tool for that, and probably try to scale this up into a startup eventually. But what decentralized social media is, that in the current world, all of social media is controlled by these huge tech companies, which are essentially platforms, and they are earning money because there are creators who are creating content on the platform, which is inviting users, and then these platforms can turn around and sell the attention of the users for advertising dollars.
Yeah.
And the platforms are laughing all the way to the bank, whereas the creators are sort of struggling to even make two ends meet. So there is a lot of platform hegemony that is going on right now, and it is so because of how internet has developed. But there is this new movement coming in, which is decentralized social media. There are like two or three different implementations of it that are going on right now. And what they're essentially doing is removing that platform layer from the middle. So all of the benefits that come from viewing a video can be given to the creator directly, and it gives power back to the creator. And all of these platforms are also very authoritative when it comes to banning people, or striking your channel, taking down all of your content. So all of these things really go against free speech, and in the decentralized space, like all of this cannot be done. So I mean, of course, that is why like it has some value, and more people should flock to it. So
So
maybe
how is it?
your
So
uh
this decentralized social media idea that you have, like, how are you sort of like what are like some of the structural things you're thinking about? Are people going to have like their own like portals where people, so if for example
right.
I'm a creator and I make content, so is there
Mhm.
something I'm going to have a portal of my own, and if there's someone who wants to listen to the stuff I make, or watch the stuff I make, are they just going to go onto that portal and access my stuff, or so how is it going to work out?
Yeah. So this is not something that I need to think about from scratch, because like it's already too late in the day to build
Hmm.
an entire social media decentralized platform from scratch. There are people who have already done it. So
Yeah.
there is something called the DSU protocol, which actually is quite well funded, has like 400,000 users, and has like $200 million in the bank in terms of funding, and there's a bunch of developers making apps on top of it. So probably that is going to be where eventually that becomes like a shelling point for creators and people who are interested in decentralized social media to go there. So these guys have already done it. So essentially what they have done is created profiles of people and each profile has a token associated with it. So all of your fans can buy Ishan Agarwal's token, and that would give them equity in your brand. So tomorrow, if you say grow up to get 1 million followers, there'll be a lot more people who are interested in buying your token. So each token will become more
Oh,
valuable, and that's how people can get interested in your profile and so on. So there are a bunch of these decentralized features that are
it's
coming
pretty
up, which are
cool.
going to yeah, totally. So essentially, the tool that I'm building will help creators move from traditional social media platforms to DSO. So I mean, people who are who already have like a bunch of content on old school social media, we're going to pitch them to move to this new place where that they can build their own brand and they can monetize their brand, and their fans can come and invest in it, and then it also opens up a market for speculators. So
Hmm.
for example, there might be some sharks out there who will realize, okay, Ishan is making great content, and right now he has less followers, but in the future he's going to do very well. So those people are going to speculate on your token, and sort of buy up your token in the hope of future returns. So this opens up a speculative market as well, and of course your own fans who are sort of buying it to keep your token are also there. This opens up these new channels of monetization, because earlier the whole monetization angle was based on advertising, which is sort of one thing. But then more and more, as you get community that is very attached to you, they would want to invest in you as well. So this is like a new way to monetize and sort of earn money for creators.
That's pretty cool. Like
Mhm.
something I'd initially thought when you were talking about that aspect of like, but 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 something I think about with people who are on these traditional platforms and some people who are really really big on the traditional platforms,
Mhm.
be it Instagram, YouTube, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, how difficult is it to sort of pitch that idea for people to then make the shift from one platform
Yeah.
to another?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah. Totally. So there are actually two kinds of debts that since I've thought about this problem quite a lot, and sort of what keeps people stuck to the platform. So there is the network debt, which is if somebody has 1 million followers, there's already like 1 million worth of network, and why would you want to move away from that? Because
yeah,
that's already giving you a stream of income and so on. So of course that is valuable. People don't want to lose out on it. If they go make an account on a new platform, there's not even 1 million people using the platform. How are they going to get 1 million followers there, right? So I mean, it's going to be a slow process getting those people on, but I think it makes sense for a very specific category of people who are going to be early adopters for it. And we need to find those people, and those are the ones that are going to move first. And eventually, when the platform really works, and it has all of its features in place, that's when it's going to start attracting the late majority, the early majority, late majority, and the laggards and so on. So there is this curve of adoption, right? Always there is a small minority of people who are early adopters, who sort of join it first, and then some more people join in, and then eventually the majority joins in. So right now, decentralized social media is not really for the majority. It is only for the early adopters who are really interested in the space, who know how to make money from the space, because a lot of things don't work. It is not very intuitive. You need to make things work. So that's why it's only fit for people who sort of understand the space and know a lot about it. Yeah.
don't you think in the long term it will still come down to how like the software is running, like how the technology is running? Because this
Mhm.
is just my take from it, and I'm not such a techie person, but I think until and unless like the software that you're providing, the services you're providing isn't of good quality, it's very difficult for people to then switch from their traditional ways of consuming content to another. So if you have made an application that's great and it's a great calendar app, let's say for example, but
Mhm.
it doesn't run smoothly, it's like really like it's just not as good, or like the feel of it on the application on your phone or on your laptop or whatever, people wouldn't then want to switch from whatever their desktop is or whatever they have on their phone. So don't you think those things come into like those little things that people often forget about, like the user interface or things like that, those generally play a lot more of a difference, like how smoothly is it running? Like oftentimes
Exactly.
many people wouldn't take those into consideration as much because they'd be thinking in the big idea space of like this is going to change
Mhm.
the technology space or something of that sort, but sometimes it could
Right.
just simply be the basics.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. And essentially, making these basics work is really a
Hmm.
long hit and trial process. where you need to discover all the flaws, and then you eventually get to a place where you can fix them. So it is in the nature of technology to get better. And
Yeah.
essentially, when a technology is new, it will be very raw. And if you remember the first iPhones, you couldn't call from them, right? Because the cell reception was so bad. I mean, obviously, when a technology is new, it will have a lot of rough edges, and that's why it's sort of not fit for everyone. And you're absolutely right. If you don't have these basics in place, even if you can attract people to the platform, so people might get attracted by the idea, and they might want to think,
Mm.
they might think it's something cool. But trying out, they might check it out, they might even install the app, make an account, sort of start using it. But when these simple things don't work, that's when a lot of people sort of churn away, and they sort of come, have a sip, and then sort of realize the drink is not good, and sort of go away and try something else. So I mean, these small little features are really very important to keep that retention. Once you get people on the platform, keeping them on the platform is another challenge. And those challenges can only be solved with time.
Yeah.
As more flows are discovered, more patches can be shipped, and more of the product can get to a final state.
Yeah. I know, Vyas, you'd only given me about an hour, and we're running late on time. So there's just a few questions I'd like to ask before we end this.
Uh-huh.
Like, are there some book recommendations you can throw my way, and maybe the listeners as well?
Yes, absolutely. So I actually am really into audiobooks, and that is really how I like to consume my books, right? So if people would want to check out my full recommendation list, I have it on my website,
Oh wow. Okay.
where I have like a separate section for it. So my website is profvyas.com.
Okay. Great.
Maybe maybe you can check
I'll
it
plug
out.
that
But
in. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
yeah, I'll just open it up very quickly and
Wait, I'll
give
just share
you
it.
the
I'll
recommendations.
just share it for people who'd what's it called? View it later on.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah. People can definitely view it. So, like some of these books are really incredible and sort of very, fundamental to the way how I think about the world. And like some of these books, I have gone back to again and again for just to refresh and read them a little bit more. So there is Skin in the Game by Nassim Nicholas Taleb, right? You're
Yeah.
sharing already.
Yeah.
All right. So,
Yeah.
so,
I was just sharing
so
it up. Yeah.
that is my whole list. So there is like a bunch of different genres in here. There are a lot of startup related books. So there's Zero to One. There is Atomic Habits, which is sort of self improvement as well. If people can apply it to business as well. And I mean, there are like history is something that I really like to read a lot. So, but there is, the history of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, which is
Mm.
really this, great work of English language. And it came out like in the 16th or the 17th century by Edward Gibbon. So that is really nice. War and Peace is sort of
One of my favorite books.
it's sort of a mixture of history and fiction, and sort of Tolstoy is in his own class.
Oh yeah.
Then
Yeah.
I like to get into philosophy a lot. So this one, a short history of modern philosophy as well as a history of Western philosophy. These are incredible books just to give you a survey of most of the thinkers that there are. And another book that has really shaped how I think about things is Zero to One by Peter Thiel. And sort of Peter Thiel, I think, is the most standout intellectual of our time right now, because it's one thing to have great ideas, but then those ideas also need to be impactful. And
Mm.
I think he sort of strikes that balance really well. Not only are his ideas great and sort of intellectually complicated, but also have a lot of impact as well. So that is really important when you are an intellectual, and I think he will go down as one of the smartest people of the 21st century, without sounding like too much of a Thiel fan, which I am, by the way.
Are you? Have you signed up for the Thiel Fellowship? I think there's like a fellowship he
Nah, nah, nah.
offers, right?
Yeah. It's not really something that you can sign up for. It's like a thing that they give to you before the age of
Oh,
18 in order to skip
damn.
college. So it's like people spend $100K going to a college in US, and their pitch is that we'll give you $100K to start a company and don't go to college. So that is essentially Thiel Fellowship, and I think the only Indian who's gotten it is the OYO founder,
Yeah,
Ritesh Agarwal.
Ritesh, what? Yeah,
Ritesh,
whatever. Ritesh. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, he was a Thiel fellow back in the day, and then there have been a lot of big companies that have been started by Thiel fellows already. Yeah.
I've heard his political views are a little abject though. From from what
Yeah,
I don't.
I mean, he was on the Donald Trump side, and he was sort of an advisor to his whole campaign. But traditionally, his views are more sort of right wing
Yeah,
and conservative, and he sort of is a free markets person as well. And I mean, in all these ways, those are his choices, I guess.
yeah.
And politically, I mean. Maybe I mean I can't really defend him, that those are his choices, right?
Yeah,
So
for sure, for sure.
yeah.
No, Shubham, like this was an absolutely incredible
Uh-huh.
chat. I'd love to have you back on in the future as well, at some point. Maybe meet
Yes.
you sometime in person because I'm based in Gurgaon as well, and I think you're based in Delhi,
All right.
so that's not
Yeah,
too far
definitely.
off.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, is there anything you'd like to pitch just before we head off? Like anywhere where people can find your work? Obviously, we've just talked about your website. But yeah,
Uh-huh.
anywhere else, your social media handles and whatever.
Yeah. I mean, do check out our podcast, Conversations on India. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Instagram, like all of your traditional channels, and very soon
Not
on
decentralized
Decentralized
yet.
social media. Very soon, not Decentralized yet. And yeah, but I mean, it was a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for having me, and I'm looking forward to our conversations on my podcast
Oh
that
yeah,
is
that
probably
that
going to happen sometime
that'd be
next week.
really fun. That'd be really fun as well.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Anyways, thank you guys. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you guys again. Bye.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye.